Hi, everyone. I am Marie Stacks, president at Boost Midwest and host of our monthly Direct Perspectives series here at Boost Midwest. I am joined today by Daleele Alison, the CEO of RooksDM. Daleele, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about RooksDM, how you got started, what you guys do. We're all ears.
Yes, more than happy to share that. So my company is RooksDM. I'm one of the co-founders there. What we do is we work with professional service companies to help them streamline their processes. And what we're focused on is how do we get them more time back in their day for their organization as well as their team so they can focus on delivering their services versus some of the admin tasks or things that they have to do that don't necessarily add direct value to serving their clients at the end of the day. And I've been doing this now. Officially started my company as a hobby back in 2014. I did moonlighting for a while, so working nights and weekends. And then in 2018, I made the jump to go full time in doing this. And it's been a great journey so far.
It's definitely a journey. Being a fellow entrepreneur, I get what you mean by that. And I definitely think, I know we've known each other for a couple months now. And every time I get to hear you talk about your clients and the work you're doing, I get excited. So we're big on teamwork here. What team members are critical to your success as a company? And then what team members do you typically bring into the conversation with your clients?
Yeah, so in terms of the company, I'm lucky to have a co-founder. So I know some business owners go at it alone. I think he's been a great asset to the company because we're able to collaborate on things. And then a lot of times we joke, we're like yin and yang. So while we try to get to the end result, is the same, or like the mission and the vision. I think sometimes how you go about doing it is very different. And those perspectives actually, I think are very beneficial because it essentially makes sure that we're covering all of our bases by looking at things at a different lens, but making sure we're trying to move forward in the same direction. So I think he would be a critical aspect. And then also internally, as we've continued to grow the business, we brought in some resources to help us out internally. One of those specifically being marketing. So marketing resource has been pivotal because as you're building a business, there are things that you're figuring out as you go. And it's kind of like going from middle school to high school to college, right? You're trying to figure out your identity and you kind of have a sense of direction and where you want to end up. But I think marketing really helps with that. And some of the exercises that we've been doing internally has allowed us to grow. And that's even represented in our shift now to really focus in on helping service-based businesses. And then one of the things we're looking at this year is maybe going a little bit deeper in some of those verticals. So he would be a pivotal, I guess, addition to the company. And if you don't have a co-founder, I suggest maybe getting a mentor, right? And they would be able to help and collaborate and brainstorm on ideas. Marketing team has been great. And then we also have added a few additional resources on the project management side. And that's been really helpful of being able to make sure we're delivering. You mentioned client specific, making sure we're hitting deliverables, timelines in alignment, budgets are still in alignment, and the requirements that we actually roll out are what they are looking for. And if not, we're tracking that along the way to make sure that we can readjust sooner rather than later. So those have definitely been critical components. And then more than anything, obviously developers, right? We are in the technology space. We do consulting and implementation. So any of the business analysts that we bring on board, as well as the developers, are key to the success of our clients.
I love that. It's funny. I know we've talked about kind of the yin and yang of our businesses. We do the operations and get to this point where we're like, okay, it's time to optimize what you're doing technically, and we're like, that's not our wheelhouse. And I immediately think of you every time. So, tracking, you mentioned, as you grow, there's this ability to track what you're doing and tracking deliverables for your clients. That's a big part of what we call our AIM solution at Boost Midwest. So how do you monitor your business's progress? And then are there any particular KPIs that you've kind of adopted along the way?
Yeah, so a few different tools that we use there. So the first one, obviously, tracking client work would be in our project management tool. We use a tool called ClickUp, which we really love. It's an amazing tool because you can add tasks, you can add workspaces, you can assign due dates, you can assign people to them. And then also it's a pretty powerful tool, to be quite honest. So kind of taking it out of the box can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming because it can do some automation, it can do some other things as well. But that kind of grounds us to know, hey, where are we at with specific tasks? Who's responsible for them? When are they due? What are the updates? Are there any attachments? We can see all that within a task view, which makes it easier. So I would recommend, if you don't have a project management tool, implementing one of those. ClickUp is one of many. You can do Asana, there's Monday.com, there's Trello. Depending on what your need is, I would say kind of do some assessment, test some things out, sign up for some free trials and see what works best. That would be the starting point. And then in terms of KPIs, I think we were talking about this. It varies. So being a startup, the goalpost is changing, and it's changing quite frequently. So one of the things that we always want to look at is obviously customer success, making sure like, hey, if we do have a project, is it long-term? Is it short-term? Were we specifically brought in for a short-term engagement? If that's okay, then we can move forward. But if there's a client that has a lot of potential to like need our services and we can grow with them, if we're not accomplishing that, then we'll look at that in terms of KPI to say, okay, what is the customer satisfaction here? What are the deliverables, and what have we missed to not allow that relationship to extend past that? Another thing that I've been hyper focused on, I guess, I do a lot of the selling as well, is KPIs around meetings. So a lot of time gets wasted within meetings. I'm technically one of my favorite things to do is just to chat with people. So that could be a gift, but also a challenge at the same time, because it's a lot of time that's going into conversations that might not help with moving your business forward. And so one of the things I've been very mindful of is kind of putting my calendar in perspective and tracking what meetings I'm having when, and then also recording that month over month to say like, hey, did I have the right number of conversations? Where are the leaks, if you will, in terms of time being wasted, and how do we correct those moving forward?
I love that you track your time. We actually use Timular to track ours. And I do it specific kind of for the same reason, but also for the fact that time is a resource we don't get back. And so it's the most valuable resource on your team, both our time as CEO and presidents, but also our team's time. And so making sure that we're being, mindful of where our time goes is such a great thing to track. I love that.
Exactly.
So you talked a little bit about what you guys do, some of the KPIs, the growth. You guys are obviously in the technical space, you're working with operations, but I'm sure you're building dashboards and dealing with data. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you have found as best practices for data collection, and then maybe even a little bit about the dashboard space that you might work with.
Yeah, so we definitely help clients with that, and we actually really appreciate what you do because we think it's important. In terms of process, we actually focus a lot of times on asking general questions as it relates to their process. And we break it down into like 4 major processes that we look at in professional service organizations. And I think that might be applicable across multiple businesses. But the first one obviously is client intake. So if you have a new prospect coming into your business, what does that process look like, and what data points do you need along the way? We look at customer onboarding. So when they sign on the dotted line and say, hey, I want to hire your company to provide services to me. We also look at management, right? So now that the client is in, they've onboarded, you're managing kind of certain activities with them. We'll look at that. And then the last one that we look at is what we call like the offboarding. So maybe you completed the project with them and they no longer need your services, or maybe they're transitioning to a different provider, or maybe kind of bringing it in-house. There's certain activities you have to do there. So we always start with the processes first. And based off that, we'll look at, and it's typically client intake. So how are you initially gathering the data from a potential client that's coming in? Are you getting it from a website form? Is it through email? Is it through text message? We try to streamline that process to begin with, because if you can get the data from the beginning into a system, then we can kind of systematize that and make things much more efficient long term. So that's why we typically always ask the question of like, hey, what's your client intake process? And what we see that works very well are usually like web forms. So you can use something as like a Jot form or Microsoft form along those lines, and that gets the data into a system. And then we can decide how we want to kind of route certain data points to either other systems. And then to your point again, once we have all the data points in a system, we can decide decide, hey, we can run, we use Power BI. It's part of the Microsoft Power Platform. So we've created dashboards for clients to be able to see kind of number of client intakes that are coming in, kind of being able to track their team progress of how many closed projects happened this month and last month, and kind of comparing those against another. But it also gives them like a visual component to be able to easily see it. And then they can say, hey, based off what I'm seeing here, I need to make these tweaks in my business, or we need to focus on keeping accounts versus having to try to get new accounts. And that's what we usually do with clients.
I love that. I love the idea that, we come in with AIM, which is analyze, innovate, and manage. You guys are doing the same thing in the sense that you're identifying what's going on. You're helping bring these systems together and really giving a story to what they're doing with their data and with their activity, and their operation. So, and then it genuinely, I know the work that you guys do improves what they do dramatically. So I love hearing kind of a little bit behind the scenes of what you're doing.
Exactly. And we always say too, like one of the things that we always say with clients is they come to us and like, oh, I want to implement this technology, whatever it may be at the time. And the first question we always ask is like, why? Right. Because unless you're a technology-based company, the technology is only there to enable you to do your job. It's not your company as a whole. So that's why we always ask the question of like, why are you looking to implement it? Do we need to implement it? And then we start to figure out, okay, what is the right solution long-term for you from a technology standpoint?
Exactly. I'm a big believer that technology is great until it gets in the way.
Yes.
And then it's useless. It's in the way. Yep. So I love that. I love that a lot. The end result of a successful project, you guys know it because you do it all the time, is a process that is systematic and sustainable. We're big on the sustainability. I know you guys are too. What do you consider, in addition to everything you've already described, is there a secret sauce or a recipe to success that you know works every time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it's a secret sauce that works every time, but I would say, especially with change. So change management is something that we always have to take in consideration. So if you're implementing either like a new way of doing things, and especially if it's like new technology, you always have to take that into consideration. So we do two things there. The first, obviously, is making sure we're providing the right training to the client at the end of the day. So the company as well as their team members are able to understand how the technology is working, how they should be using it, and where to use it when. So that's a big thing there. And then the second thing along the lines of like during implementation that we always try to find as what we call like a champion is who can we work with that might not be at a decision-making level, but that are like boots on the ground day in and day out will be using the system. How do we get them either in the conversation a little bit early, and how do we get them to kind of see what we're building is going to ultimately add value, and get them to understand that, and also train them in a way that if we do walk away and like we're no longer supporting it, or like now it's up and running, their colleagues can come to them, right, and say like, hey, Marie, I know we just implemented Microsoft Teams. I'm not really sure where to find the files, or where are these files located, or what's the structure here, or how do I message people through the platform? We want to make sure that their colleagues are able to access a resource that might be outside of us, and that they're in a good position to do that. And the way we do that is through like trying to get champions internally to be able to advocate for the technology moving forward. So you say finding the champions, and we've always called it stakeholder engagement. I'm going to adopt how you say that because it sounds so much better. Yeah.
I mean, it's a big piece of success when it comes to a project is knowing who to bring to the table at the beginning, or when to bring the right people to the table, and then making sure the right people have bought in. I mean, that is stakeholder engagement 101, and calling it, knowing when to bring the right champions to the table is perfect. I love it.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, let's dive a little bit into, we're both entrepreneurs. We obviously are both running businesses that are rapidly growing, which is fantastic, but also can be a little challenging. Yep. What are some of the challenges that you face as a business leader in today's market?
Yeah, so it depends, right? And especially we're essentially a small business, so there's a lot that's evolving over time, whether it be our services, how we operate, kind of certain procedures. I think the biggest challenge is once you figure something out, there's a new problem that awaits. So I guess having that mindset of like, hey, this is awesome, I just figured out the challenge to whatever it may be, but I know there's a new problem coming down the pipeline essentially that I have to solve for, that maybe I've seen before, or maybe that I'm kind of prepared for by having the right people ready to ask questions to. And I think that sometimes can get, to be quite honest, like a little discouraging, because you get a win, and then as soon as you get a win, there's another new challenge facing you. You're like, how do you keep pushing forward? Because it's challenge after challenge. But I think the reward to that is always seeing that once you do get the win, you've progressed those little wins over and over again that add up over time, which I think makes it worth doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. And I personally love the aspect of, as I build my team, I realize how much bigger of an impact our company has that I can have on folks. You know, at Boost, we tend to incubate businesses as well as I consider incubating leaders. So, you know, it's kind of the fun part is you get to like have this vision and put it together. But like you said, you don't get into it because it's boring. I mean, there's always something to figure out, no matter what.
Yes.
So on kind of on that theme, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask because I tend to take away a little bit of your advice on this too. But do you have a daily motto or an activity that you do consistently that keeps you energized?
Daily motto, yeah, it's usually just when I talk to clients or my team member, that usually is, so I'm much of an extrovert. So being able to see growth in other people or in companies and stuff brings me a lot of energy. And I know sometimes it takes a few weeks or months at times as we're rolling things out. But I think once we get to a point to see, hey, I was able to get on a 30-minute call and do a consultation with someone and they walked away with a lot of value, reassures and re-energizes me of like, hey, the value that I'm providing is by giving them a second opinion or maybe adding some knowledge that they didn't have before the conversation. So that to me is very rewarding. And I think the other thing too is, and I actually have a sticky note, I went to a presentation the other day, is the whole model around just get better 1% every day. And I think it's like the little progressions over time. Once again, it's like the compound effect of like, you could not go to the gym for 3 months and try to go every day for 24 hours, but you still won't get the same result if you go to the gym 3 days a week for 30 minutes, right? You'll start to see a more compound effect over time. So that to me, I always try to remind myself of. That's
a great analogy. It's kind of that idea of like one step at a time, but being data minded, I like the 1%, 1% improvement.
Yeah. And you know, as an entrepreneur, it's hard to accept just 1%, right? Like you want to do
really
5 or 10 or 15. Yeah.
I'm like, where's the 10% gain? Or like, you know, it's like, oh, we grew 200% last year. Let's do 300 this year. And I'm like, wait, let's think that through.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, okay, let's kind of top it off on this question. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, what is it that makes you excited about what your company brings to the table?
Yeah, I think obviously we're in the tech business, so being able to help people save time or do things faster, efficient, smarter, or less of a hassle with the right technology. I think that keeps us energized. We always say, we kind of joke and say we're in the time-saving business, so that's where we spend most of our efforts. So how do we leverage technology for companies and their team to be able to operate much more efficiently and save time at the end of the day? So to us, that brings us the greatest joy, and being able to see the great wins off of that. And we always say too, like, if you think about a task, right, and it takes you 30 minutes to do, and that's just for like one client, let's say, what if we can get that down to 10 minutes per client? And if you're doing that 10 times a day, then you can do much more, so you can impact more people's lives at the end of the day. And it also alleviates a lot of your headaches and having to work 80 hours a week. So that's what we're focused on doing a lot of, and that's what we find the most joy out of.
I love it. I love that. And I love what you guys do. Thank you for joining me today on this, Daleele. It's been my pleasure. And if you are watching this and you're looking for something, someone to guide you through that process of really improving your technology and the processes that are, you know, kind of built therein, call Daleele and his team. You really won't be disappointed. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.